3 days after giving birth to twins, Amara Collins was handed divorce papers in her hospital room before her stitches had healed, before she was strong enough to stand, before she'd even learned how to nurse both babies at once. The corner of the document scraped against her trembling fingers as Daniel placed it on the bedside table, his eyes fixed on the wall behind her head, anywhere but her face. "My family and I have decided this is for the best," he said, his voice flat and rehearsed, like he'd practiced the line in front of a mirror. Amara's whole body shook, pain radiating through her abdomen, where they'd cut her open just 72 hours ago to pull her babies into the world. The epidural had worn off. The pain medication was barely touching the agony that split her in half every time she tried to move. "Please," she whispered, her voice cracking around the word. Can we talk about this when I'm home? When I'm stronger? Please, Daniel." But he only stepped back, creating distance between them, as if her desperation was something contagious, something shameful he didn't want to catch. His mother, Helena Whitmore, stood beside him in a cream Chanel suit that probably cost more than Amara's mother earned in 6 months. Her arms were folded across her chest, her posture perfect, her smile sharp, and satisfied, the smile of a woman who'd orchestrated a victory and was savoring every second of it. "You should sign quickly, dear," Helena said, her voice crisp and cold as fresh snow. "The babies will need their mother's name on the birth certificates, but that's where your involvement ends. You've served your biological function. That's all that was ever required." Amara's throat closed. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. The fluorescent hospital lights buzzed overhead, too bright, too harsh, making everything feel surreal and nightmarish. "Daniel," she tried again, reaching one shaking hand toward her husband. "Please. We made vows. We can work through this. I love you." Helena laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Love. How quaint. Tell me, Amara, what exactly has your love contributed to this family?" "Nothing. But your womb, well, that finally proved useful." The family lawyer, a thin man in an expensive suit who'd been standing silently in the corner, stepped forward and placed a pen on top of the papers. He didn't meet Amara's eyes either. "Sign on the highlighted lines," he said mechanically. "You'll receive the settlement outlined in your prenuptial agreement. Given the circumstances, we're being quite generous." Circumstances. As if abandoning a woman 3 days postpartum was a business transaction, a line item, a necessary inconvenience. Down the hall, one of the twins started crying, that desperate newborn wail that made Amara's breasts ache and her arms feel empty, even though they were already empty. "That's Oliver," she whispered. "He's hungry. I need to feed him." "The nurses will handle it," Helena said dismissively. "Formula is perfectly adequate. You won't be nursing them anyway, so there's no point in starting." Something inside Amara cracked. Not loudly, not with drama or screaming. It broke the way ice breaks on a frozen lake, quietly, completely, a fracture spreading beneath the surface where no one could see. Her heart shattered. And in that shattering, in that moment of total devastation, something else began to form. Something cold, something calculating, something that would remember every word, every cruelty, every moment they believed she was powerless. But she didn't let them see it. She picked up the pen with trembling fingers and signed her name on every highlighted line. Her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall, her handwriting shaky but legible. "There," she whispered. "It's done." Helena's smile widened. She reached out and took the papers, scanning them quickly before handing them to the lawyer. "Excellent," Helena said. "We'll have your belongings sent to whatever address you provide. I assume you'll be returning to your mother's apartment? Though I can't imagine how you'll both fit in such a small space." Daniel finally looked at Amara then. For 1 second, she thought she saw something, guilt maybe, or regret, but then it was gone, replaced by the same cold distance he'd been wearing for months. "This doesn't mean I hate you," he said quietly. "It means you chose them," Amara whispered back. He didn't deny it. He just turned and walked out. His mother and the lawyer following behind him, their expensive shoes clicking against the hospital floor like a countdown. The door closed. Amara sat alone in her hospital bed, bleeding through her pads, her body broken, her babies down the hall with strangers, her marriage dissolved on paper before the ink was even dry. She stared at her empty hands for a long time. Then she picked up her phone with shaking fingers and did something she hadn't done in 3 years. She called her mother. Mama, she whispered when the line connected. I need you. Her mother didn't ask questions. She just said, I'm coming right now, baby. Hold on, I'm coming. Amara set the phone down and closed her eyes. They thought they'd won. They thought she had nothing. No money, no power, no options. They thought they'd taken everything that mattered and left her with nothing but shame and an empty bank account. They were wrong. But they didn't know that yet. And Amara, broken, bleeding, abandoned, made a decision in that hospital room that would change everything. She would let them believe they'd won. She would stay silent. She would heal. And when the time was right, when she was strong enough and ready enough, she would show the Whitmore family exactly what happened when they underestimated a woman who had nothing left to lose. But before we go back to how it all ended, let's return to how it began. Back to when Amara was just a woman in love, walking into a family that would try to destroy her. Back to the moment she first realized she didn't belong in the Whitmore mansion. Back to the beginning. The bathroom mirror was fogging from the shower steam when Amara first realized she didn't belong in the Whitmore mansion. She'd been married to Daniel for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of trying to memorize which fork went with which course, which topics were acceptable at dinner, which version of herself was palatable to a family whose wealth was measured in centuries, not dollars. Her reflection stared back at her dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide, shoulders tight with tension she couldn't shake even in sleep. She could hear the dinner bell chiming downstairs, 2 sharp rings that echoed through the marble hallways like a summons. Helena Whitmore did not tolerate lateness. Amara had learned that on day 2, she smoothed down her dress, the navy one that had appeared in her closet with a note in Helena's precise handwriting. Appropriate for family dinners. Not, I thought you'd like this, or this would look lovely on you. Just, appropriate. As if Amara herself was inherently inappropriate. She took a breath, painted on a smile that felt more like armor than joy, and headed downstairs. The Whitmore dining room was the kind of space that belonged in museums, not homes. Crystal chandeliers, oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors, a table that could seat 20, but tonight held only 5. Helena sat at the head like a queen holding court, her silver jewelry catching the light, her posture so rigid it looked painful. Daniel's father, Richard Whitmore, was scrolling through his phone, barely acknowledging Amara's entrance. Daniel's sister, Victoria, was examining her manicure with the kind of bored superiority that Amara was beginning to recognize as the family's default expression. And Daniel, her husband, the man who'd promised her partnership and protection, sat rigid in his chair, his jaw already clenched, preparing for something Amara couldn't name. He didn't look up when she entered. He hadn't really looked at her since the wedding night. You're late, Helena said, her voice smooth as silk and sharp as scissors. We've been waiting. Amara glanced at the antique clock on the mantel. 6:58 p.m. Dinner was at 7. I'm sorry, I thought. Helena raised one perfectly manicured hand, cutting her off mid-sentence. In this family, Amara, we arrive early. Punctuality isn't merely being on time, it's being prepared, present, and respectful of others' schedules. I assume Daniel explained this to you. Victoria snickered into her wine glass. Richard didn't look up from his phone. Daniel reached for his water and drank, saying nothing. Amara sat down carefully, her hands already trembling, and thought, this is my life now. The first course arrived, some kind of bisque Amara couldn't identify, served in bowls that probably cost more than her mother's monthly rent. Her stomach churned. She'd barely eaten all day, too anxious about dinner to keep anything down. She picked up her spoon, the smaller one on the outside. She'd memorized that much, but her hands were shaking so badly the silver clattered against the china. The sound seemed to echo in the vast room. Helena's eyes snapped to the noise like a hawk spotting wounded prey. Nervous, Amara? Helena asked, her smile thin and cold. Or simply unused to formal dining? The implication hung in the air. You don't belong here. I'm fine, Helena, Amara said quietly, keeping her eyes on the soup. Just adjusting. Adjusting? Helena repeated, swirling her wine with deliberate slowness. How long does adjustment typically take in your experience? Because 3 weeks seems more than adequate to learn basic table etiquette. Victoria laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Mother, be fair. She's trying. Some people just take longer to adapt. The word adapt sounded like an insult. Tell me, Amara, Helena continued, leaning back in her chair. What exactly did you do before you married my son? Your background is so limited in the files we received. Limited, not modest, not simple. Limited. I was a teacher, Amara said, forcing herself to meet Helena's gaze. Elementary school, third grade. Helena's eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch, the only indication of surprise in her carefully controlled expression. A teacher. How? Serviceable. The word dripped with condescension. And your family? Daniel mentioned. Your father passed away? Amara's throat tightened. When I was very young, my mother raised me. Single-parent household, Richard said suddenly, not looking up from his phone. Statistics show children from such environments often struggle with, Dad, Daniel finally spoke, his voice tight. That's enough, but it was weak, half-hearted. The kind of defense that made things worse by highlighting how little effort he was willing to expend. Helena waved her hand dismissively. Oh, don't be so sensitive, Daniel. We're simply getting to know your wife. Family is about understanding where everyone comes from. She turned back to Amara, her smile sharp as a blade. Your mother, she's a seamstress, correct? How charming. Very. Hard-working. The emphasis on hard-working made it sound like a character flaw. She's a woman who provided for her daughter, Amara said, her voice steadier than she felt. She taught me dignity, and dignity, Helena interrupted, is demonstrated through comportment, education, and breeding. It's not something one claims, it's something one possesses inherently. The message was clear. You don't possess it. Amara's vision blurred slightly. She forced herself to take a spoonful of soup even though it tasted like ash in her mouth. Across the table, Daniel's jaw worked like he was chewing words he'd never say. For one moment, Amara thought he might actually defend her properly. Might actually be the man who'd knelt in front of her 6 months ago and promised, I'll protect you from everything. Instead, he cleared his throat and said, Amara's still learning. She'll adapt. There was that word again. Adapt. As if she was defective. As if she needed to be fixed, reformed, reprogrammed to fit into their world. Of course she will, Helena said smoothly. We all want this marriage to succeed. That's why I've taken the liberty of hiring Mrs. Pemberton. She specializes in etiquette coaching for newcomers to high society. Victoria nearly choked on her wine, trying not to laugh. That's not necessary, Amara started. It's already arranged, Helena said with finality. She'll begin next week. 3 times weekly should be sufficient. We have several important events coming up, and I won't have the Whitmore name embarrassed by preventable mistakes. Richard finally looked up from his phone. Good thinking, Helena. The governor's gala is in 2 months. Can't have any incidents. Amara felt something twist in her chest. Not anger, not yet. Something closer to profound loneliness. She was sitting at a table with 4 people, including her husband, and she'd never felt more alone in her life. Thank you, she said quietly, the words like gravel in her throat. That's very thoughtful. Helena's smile widened. We take care of our own, dear, even when they need considerable help. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of silent humiliation. Every bite Amara took felt watched, judged, found wanting. Every word she didn't say felt like a small surrender. When dessert finally ended, Helena stood gracefully. Amara, a word in the drawing room. It wasn't a request. Daniel didn't follow. Victoria and Richard dispersed to other parts of the mansion. Amara followed Helena alone, her heart hammering. The drawing room was all dark wood and darker oil paintings. Helena poured herself a brandy but didn't offer Amara one. Let me be very clear, Helena said, turning to face Amara with a smile that never reached her eyes. You married into a legacy. That comes with expectations. I don't know what romantic fantasies Daniel sold you, but love is not enough in families like ours. Breeding matters, reputation matters, contribution matters. She took a sip of brandy, letting the words sink in. Do you understand what I'm saying? Amara understood perfectly. She wasn't wanted. She was tolerated. Conditionally. I understand, Amara whispered. Good, Helena said. Then we won't have any problems, as long as you know your place. She walked out, leaving Amara standing alone in the drawing room, surrounded by portraits of Whitmore ancestors who seemed to stare down at her with the same cold judgment as their living descendants. Amara stood there for a long time, her arms wrapped around herself, trying to remember the warmth of her mother's small apartment, the laughter, the safety. This mansion had neither. That night, Amara lay in bed beside Daniel, careful not to touch him, and realized something terrifying. She'd married a man she loved, but she'd joined a family that would never love her back. 6 months into her marriage, Amara stopped trying to be herself at dinner. It was easier to be no one. She'd learned the rules through trial and painful error. Speak only when addressed. Never contradict Daniel's father. Never laugh too loudly. Never ask Helena personal questions. Never, ever suggest changes to family traditions that had existed since before Amara was born. The etiquette lessons with Mrs. Pemberton had helped. At least now Amara knew which fork to use, how to hold a wine glass, how to make polite conversation about nothing. But knowing the rules and being accepted were two entirely different things. Tonight's dinner was different. The Whitmores were hosting the Ashfords, old money, old connections, the kind of family that appeared in society pages and political donor lists. Amara had spent 3 hours getting ready. The dress Helena had selected for her, the jewelry Helena had loaned her, the hairstyle Helena had approved. She looked like a Whitmore wife. She felt like a fraud. "And this is Amara," Helena said, introducing her to Margaret Ashford with a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. "Daniel's wife. She's still quite new to our world, but she's learning." The pause before learning was deliberate, a warning, an apology for Amara's existence. Margaret Ashford looked Amara up and down with the kind of assessment reserved for livestock at auction. "Charming," Margaret said, the word empty of meaning. "And what did you say your family does?" "My mother works in alterations," Amara said, keeping her voice steady. Mrs. Pemberton had coached her. "Never apologize for your background, but never elaborate unnecessarily." "How industrious," Margaret said, already turning away. The dinner was an endurance test. Amara sat between Victoria and one of the Ashford sons, a man named Preston, who spent the entire first course explaining his yacht specifications as if Amara had asked. Daniel sat across from her, next to a woman named Celeste Ashford, blonde, perfectly polished, laughing at everything he said with the kind of ease Amara used to have with him before the wedding. "They dated, you know," Victoria whispered suddenly, leaning close enough that her perfume made Amara's eyes water. Daniel and Celeste. Everyone thought they'd marry. Helena certainly hoped so. Amara's stomach dropped. She watched Daniel smile at something. Celeste said, watched the way he leaned in slightly, engaged and present in a way he never was with Amara anymore. "Why didn't they?" Amara asked quietly. Victoria shrugged, spearing a piece of duck with her fork. "Daniel said he wanted love, not arrangement. Ironic, isn't it? Now he has neither." The words landed like a slap. Amara forced herself to take a sip of water, forced herself to keep breathing normally. "I think it's wonderful that Daniel married for love," Margaret Ashford said suddenly, from the head of the table, her voice carrying across the conversation. "So refreshing to see young people following their hearts." But her tone suggested it was anything but wonderful. It suggested it was foolish, reckless, a mistake that would inevitably correct itself. Helena laughed lightly. "Yes, well, love is a lovely foundation. But families like ours require more than sentiment, don't we? Legacy, continuity, purpose." Every word was aimed at Amara. "Absolutely," Richard agreed. "Which reminds me, any news on that front, Daniel? Your mother and I are eager for grandchildren." The table went quiet. Amara felt every eye shift to her, felt the weight of their expectation pressed down on her chest like a physical force. Daniel's jaw clenched. "We're not discussing this at dinner." "Why not?" Helena asked, her voice deceptively light. "It's a natural question. You've been married 6 months. Most couples in our circle announce pregnancies within the first year. Most couples also have privacy," Daniel said tightly. "Privacy is a luxury, darling. Not a right," Helena said, "especially when family legacy is at stake." Celeste Ashford touched Daniel's arm gently. "Your mother just cares about you, Daniel. That's all." The intimacy of the gesture, the ease with which Celeste touched him, the way Daniel didn't pull away, made something crack inside Amara's chest. "Perhaps it's simply taking time," Margaret Ashford said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "I had a cousin who struggled for years. Turned out to be a medical issue. Quite fixable, thankfully. The implication was clear. The problem was with Amara. There's no issue, Amara said quietly, surprised by her own voice. Helena's eyes sharpened. Then perhaps there's no effort. Some women struggle with fulfilling their marital obligations. It can be overwhelming when one isn't accustomed to the pressures of our lifestyle. Victoria snorted into her wine. Preston Ashford, oblivious to the tension, said cheerfully, "My wife got pregnant on our honeymoon. 3 days. I told her she was efficient." Everyone laughed except Amara. She sat frozen, her hands clenched in her lap beneath the table, her nails digging into her palms so hard she wondered if she'd draw blood. Daniel still said nothing. He was staring at his plate, his jaw working, his shoulders tight, but he didn't defend her, didn't change the subject, didn't do anything except endure the conversation as if it was happening to someone else. "Well," Helena said, standing gracefully, "let's adjourn to the salon for coffee. Amara, dear, perhaps you could help the staff clear the table? I'm sure you're familiar with that kind of work." The insult was so casual, so perfectly delivered, that for a moment Amara wasn't sure she'd heard correctly. But Victoria's smirk confirmed it. Margaret Ashford's raised eyebrow confirmed it. And Daniel's silence, his damning, cowardly silence, confirmed it most of all. "Of course," Amara said, her voice barely above a whisper. She stood on shaking legs and began collecting plates while the guests filtered out of the dining room, their laughter and conversation fading down the hallway. One of the housekeepers, an older woman named Maria, appeared beside her. "Mrs. Whitmore, please, this is my job." "It's fine," Amara said, her voice cracking. "I don't mind." Maria gently took the plates from Amara's trembling hands. "You should join your guests." But Amara couldn't move. She stood in the empty dining room, surrounded by the wreckage of a dinner that felt more like an execution, and finally let the tears fall. She cried silently, her shoulders shaking, her breath coming in short gasps. The door opened. For one desperate second, Amara thought it might be Daniel, that he'd come back to check on her, to apologize, to be her husband, but it was Victoria. "Mother sent me to tell you we're taking photographs in the salon. Family and guests, you should fix your face. First you look a mess." She left without waiting for a response. Amara wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and walked to the bathroom down the hall. Her reflection stared back at her red eyes, smudged makeup, the look of a woman breaking apart in slow motion. She cleaned herself up as best she could, reapplied her lipstick with shaking hands, and forced her expression into something neutral. Then she walked to the salon where everyone was gathered, laughing and posing for photographs that would be perfect lies. Daniel was standing with Celeste, their heads close together as they looked at something on his phone. Helena was directing the photographer like a general commanding troops. No one noticed when Amara entered. No one made room for her in the frame. She stood in the doorway, watching her husband laugh with a woman who fit into his world effortlessly, watching his family perform togetherness for the camera while excluding her from every shot. And Amara understood something fundamental. She wasn't Daniel's wife. She was his mistake, his embarrassment, his eventually disposable problem. Later that night, alone in the bedroom, while Daniel stayed downstairs with the guests, Amara sat on the edge of the bed and made a decision. She couldn't change them, couldn't make them love her, couldn't force Daniel to be the man he'd promised to be, but she could survive. She would learn to be invisible when necessary, silent when required, perfect when demanded. She would become whatever they needed her to be. Because somewhere deep inside, despite everything, she still believed that if she could just be good enough, if she could just prove her worth, Daniel would remember why he married her. She still believed love could save them. She was wrong. But she wouldn't realize that until it was almost too late. The bathroom floor was cold against Amara's knees. 18 months into her marriage, and she'd memorized this position kneeling, staring, hoping, breaking. One line. Always one line. She dropped the pregnancy test into the wastebasket where 9 others had landed this year alone. Each one a silent scream her body refused to hear. Her fingers pressed against her empty stomach, and the sob that escaped her throat was so quiet it didn't even echo in the marble bathroom of the Whitmore mansion. 18 months of trying, 18 months of hope dying slower than anything should be allowed to die. The dinner bell chimed downstairs. 2 sharp rings. Helena was waiting. Amara stood on shaking legs, splashed cold water on her face, and checked her reflection. Red-rimmed eyes, hollow cheeks, the look of a woman drowning in a house full of people who would watch her sink. She pinched her cheeks to bring back color, forced her lips into something resembling a smile, and headed downstairs. The dining room felt like a courtroom lately. Every dinner was an interrogation. Every conversation circled back to the same question, the same accusation, the same verdict. Insufficient. Tonight, Helena wasn't alone at the head of the table. Dr. Margaret Sterling sat beside her. The fertility specialist Helena had insisted Amara see. The woman who'd poked and prodded and run tests for 3 months before delivering her carefully neutral conclusions. Dr. Sterling was kind enough to join us, Helena said, her smile sharp. I thought it would be helpful to discuss your results in a family setting. Amara's blood went cold. I thought those were confidential. Darling, there are no secrets in families like ours, Helena said. Besides, Dr. Sterling assures me that sharing information will help us all understand the challenges we're facing. The "we" made Amara's stomach turn. This wasn't their challenge, it was hers. They'd made that abundantly clear. Daniel sat rigid in his chair, not meeting Amara's eyes. Richard was scrolling through his phone as always. Victoria was filing her nails, already smirking. Please sit, Dr. Sterling said, her voice professionally kind in a way that felt rehearsed. Amara sat, her hands trembling in her lap. I want to be clear, doctor. Sterling began, opening a folder that made Amara want to run from the room. Mrs. Whitmore's test results show no definitive medical barriers to conception. Her hormone levels are within normal range. Her reproductive system appears healthy. Relief flooded through Amara for exactly 3 seconds. However, Dr. Sterling continued, and that word landed like a gavel. Stress can significantly impact fertility. And it's clear from our sessions that Mrs. Whitmore is experiencing considerable psychological strain. Psychological strain, Helena repeated slowly. How interesting. And what exactly is causing this strain? The way she asked made it clear she believed Amara was manufacturing excuses. Adapting to a new lifestyle can be overwhelming, Dr. Sterling said diplomatically. The pressure to conceive, combined with adjusting to high expectations that every woman in this family has met, Helena interrupted. I had Daniel within 6 months of marriage. Richard's mother had 3 children in 4 years. This is not an unusual expectation, doctor. This is family responsibility. With respect, Mrs. Whitmore. Let me ask directly, Helena said, leaning forward. Is my daughter-in-law capable of bearing children, or is she not? The silence stretched like a blade. Medically, Dr. Sterling said carefully, I see no reason why she couldn't conceive with time. Time, Richard said, finally looking up from his phone. How much more time? We've already waited 18 months. At this rate, I'll be too old to enjoy my grandchildren. Dad, Daniel said weakly. Don't dad me, Daniel, Richard snapped. This is a legitimate concern. We have legacy to consider. Business succession requires heirs. You knew this when you married. Maybe the issue isn't medical, Victoria said suddenly, her voice dripping with false innocence. Maybe it's compatibility. Maybe their genetics just don't match. The implication hung in the air. Wrong breeding stock. Amara felt her throat closing. She looked at Daniel, silently begging him to say something, to defend her, to be her husband. But Daniel just sat there, jaw clenched, staring at his water glass like it held answers. There's another possibility, Helena said, her voice deceptively calm. Perhaps the problem is behavioral. Dr. Sterling mentioned stress, but stress is a choice, isn't it? Some women handle pressure, others crumble. That's not fair, Amara whispered. Fair? Helena's eyebrows rose. What's not fair is watching my son's life be put on hold by someone who can't fulfill the most basic requirement of marriage. Helena, please, Dr. Sterling interjected. This kind of environment isn't conducive to. I'm creating clarity, doctor, not environment, Helena said. Amara needs to understand what's at stake. This isn't about feelings or comfort. This is about duty. She turned her cold gaze on Amara. I've made an appointment for you with Dr. Chen at the Preston Fertility Clinic. They specialize in more aggressive interventions. IVF, hormone therapy, whatever it takes. I don't want, Amara started. What you want is irrelevant, Helena said flatly. You married into this family. You accepted the responsibilities that came with that choice. Now you'll fulfill them. Or, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Or what? Or divorce? Or replacement? Or disposal? Maybe we should take a break from this conversation, Daniel said finally, his voice tight. A break. Helena laughed bitterly. That's your solution? More waiting? More patience while the calendar pages turn and our bloodline stalls? She's my wife, Daniel said. But even that defense was weak, uncertain. Yes, Helena said, and wives have purposes. If she can't fulfill hers, then perhaps we need to reconsider the arrangement. The word arrangement echoed in Amara's head. Not marriage, arrangement. Dr. Sterling stood abruptly. I think I should go. This is beyond my scope as a physician. Of course, Helena said graciously. Thank you for your time, doctor. We'll handle things from here. After Dr. Sterling left, the dinner continued in brutal silence. Amara couldn't eat, couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Finally, Helena stood. Richard, Victoria, let's give Daniel and Amara privacy. Perhaps he can explain reality to her more clearly than I can. They filed out, leaving Amara and Daniel alone in the cavernous dining room. The silence stretched between them like an ocean. Daniel, Amara whispered finally, please say something. He rubbed his face with both hands, looking exhausted. What do you want me to say? That you don't agree with them. That I'm more than a breeding tool. That you married me because you love me. I did love you, Daniel said, and the past tense shattered something inside her. Did? He looked at her finally, and his eyes were empty. I don't know what I feel anymore, Amara. I'm tired. I'm pressured from every side. My mother calls me twice a day. My father questions my judgment. And you. He stopped. And I what? Amara asked, her voice breaking. You can't give me what I need, he said simply. A baby? That's all I am to you? An incubator? That's not fair. None of this is fair. Amara's voice rose for the first time in months. You promised to protect me. You promised we'd face everything together. And instead, you let them tear me apart at dinner and say nothing. What am I supposed to do? Daniel shouted back. Choose between you and my entire family? The question hung in the air. Amara stared at him, waiting for him to take it back, to say of course he'd choose her. But he didn't. Maybe my mother is right, he said finally, quietly. Maybe this was a mistake. The words hit Amara like physical blows. She stood on trembling legs. I'm going to bed, Amara. But she was already walking away, her vision blurred with tears, her heart cracking apart in her chest. She didn't go to their bedroom. She went to the guest room they'd turned into a future nursery, soft yellow walls, a white crib in the corner, a rocking chair by the window. She sat in that chair and rocked slowly, her arms wrapped around herself, pretending she was holding the baby she didn't have. I'll love you, she whispered to the empty room. I'll protect you. I'll make sure nobody ever makes you feel like this. Her voice cracked, and the tears finally came hot and silent and endless. She cried until there was nothing left inside her, but a hollow ache and a tiny stubborn spark of hope that refused to die no matter how hard they tried to kill it. Because Amara had learned something in 18 months of cruelty, 18 months of humiliation, 18 months of being told she was worthless. She'd learned how to survive. And surviving was the first step to something far more dangerous. It was the first step to fighting back. 3 weeks after that dinner, Amara woke at dawn and vomited violently into the toilet. Her whole body shook as she emptied her stomach, sweat beading on her forehead, her hands gripping the cold porcelain like it was the only solid thing in a world that wouldn't stop spinning. When the nausea finally passed, she sat back against the bathroom wall, breathing hard, her heart hammering in her chest. Morning sickness. The thought hit her like lightning. For the first time in 2 years, she felt something that terrified her more than hope ever had. She felt possibility. Her hands trembled as she opened the cabinet under the sink and pulled out a pregnancy test from the box she'd hidden behind the cleaning supplies. She'd stopped keeping them in plain sight months ago because seeing them was like staring at her own failures. But now, with her stomach still churning and her body feeling strange and foreign, she unwrapped the test with shaking fingers and did what she'd done 100 times before. Then she waited. Those 3 minutes felt longer than the entire 2 years combined. She paced the bathroom, her bare feet silent on the marble tile, her breath coming in short gasps. Please, she thought, please let this be real. Please let this be the moment everything changes. The timer on her phone buzzed. Amara closed her eyes, took a breath, and looked at the test. 2 lines. 2 perfect, undeniable lines. She stared at them for so long they blurred through her tears. She took 3 more tests, one after another, and each one showed the same result. Pregnant. After 2 years of trying, of failing, of being told she was incapable, she was pregnant. Amara's first instinct was to run downstairs and tell Daniel, to share this moment, this miracle, with the man she'd married. But something stopped her. Some instinct whispered, wait. So she hid the tests, got dressed, and went through her morning routine in a daze, her hand unconsciously drifting to her still flat stomach every few minutes. She'd tell Daniel tonight, privately, just the 2 of them. Maybe this would fix things. Maybe this would remind him why he married her. Maybe this would make him love her again. God, how desperately she wanted to believe that. She told him that evening in their bedroom, after dinner, when they were alone. Daniel, she said, her voice shaking with nervous excitement, I have something to tell you. He looked up from his laptop, distracted. Can it wait? I have a call with Tokyo in 20 minutes. No, Amara said. It can't wait. Something in her tone made him close the laptop. She handed him the pregnancy test, her hands trembling. For a moment, he just stared at it. Then his eyes widened slightly. Is this you? I'm pregnant, Amara whispered. We're going to have a baby. She waited for joy, for relief, for him to sweep her into his arms and tell her everything would be okay now. Instead, Daniel's face went carefully blank. How far along? He asked. I don't know exactly. A few weeks, maybe? I have a doctor's appointment scheduled for. We should tell my mother, he said abruptly. What? No, I wanted us to have this moment, just us, before we tell anyone. She's been waiting for this news for 2 years, Amara. We should tell her. Something in his voice made Amara's stomach turn. This wasn't excitement, this was obligation. Relief that he'd finally fulfilled a requirement. Can we wait until after the first trimester? Amara asked. Until we know everything's okay? My mother will want to know immediately. I'm asking you to wait, Amara said, her voice firmer than she felt. Please, Daniel. For me. He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. Fine, but we tell them at 12 weeks. No later. It wasn't the response she'd hoped for, but it was something. Amara managed to keep the secret for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of morning sickness she hid. 3 weeks of exhaustion she explained as a cold. 3 weeks of placing her hand protectively over her stomach when no one was watching. But Helena Whitmore didn't miss anything. At Sunday brunch, Helena's eyes sharpened as she watched Amara push her eggs around her plate. Not hungry, Amara? Helena asked, her voice deceptively light. Just a bit under the weather, Amara said. Under the weather, Helena repeated. How long has this been going on? A few weeks. It's nothing serious. Helena's gaze dropped to Amara's plate, then to her face, then unmistakably to her stomach. Daniel, Helena said suddenly, is there something you need to tell us? Daniel's fork clattered against his plate. He looked at Amara, then at his mother, his jaw tight. Mother, is your wife pregnant? Helena asked directly. The table went silent. Victoria's eyes widened. Richard looked up from his phone. Even the house staff seemed to freeze. We were going to tell you, Daniel said finally. We just wanted to wait. You're pregnant, Helena said, and something in her voice made Amara's blood run cold. It wasn't joy. It wasn't relief. It was calculation. Yes, Amara said quietly. About 6 weeks. 6 weeks, Helena repeated. And you didn't think to inform the family? We wanted to make sure everything was healthy? Helena interrupted. Of course. How prudent. She stood abruptly. Daniel, my study. Now. Mother, this isn't now. Daniel left the table without looking at Amara. Victoria leaned forward, her smile sharp. Congratulations, sister-in-law. You finally proved yourself useful. The word useful echoed in Amara's head long after the family dispersed. That night, Amara couldn't find Daniel. He wasn't in their bedroom, wasn't in his office. She finally found him in the library, staring out the window with a glass of scotch. What did your mother say? Amara asked quietly. Daniel didn't turn around. She's pleased. She's already calling her lawyers to update the trust documents. Her lawyers? Why would... The baby changes things legally, Daniel said, his voice flat. Inheritance structures, estate planning. My mother wants everything documented properly. Amara's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach. Daniel, this is our baby, not a legal transaction. In this family, everything is a legal transaction. Do you even want this baby? Amara asked, the question bursting out before she could stop it. Daniel finally turned to face her. His expression was unreadable. I want an heir. My family wants an heir. You finally provided what was expected. Congratulations. The coldness in his voice made Amara's eyes burn. That's it? That's all you have to say? What do you want me to say, Amara? That I'm overjoyed? That this fixes everything? It doesn't. You're pregnant. That's good for the family. But it doesn't change anything between us. It could, Amara whispered. We could start over. Be partners again, We were never partners, Daniel said quietly. We were never equals, I thought. I thought love would be enough. But my mother was right. Love is not enough in families like ours. He walked past her, leaving her standing alone in the library, one hand on her stomach, tears streaming down her face. The next morning, Amara woke to find Helena in her bedroom. We need to discuss arrangements, Helena said without preamble. Arrangements? For the pregnancy. You'll see Dr. Chen weekly. No travel, no stress, no unnecessary activities. You're carrying a Whitmore heir now. That requires proper management. I'm pregnant, not sick. You're a vessel, Helena said flatly. And vessels are handled with care until they're no longer needed. The words landed like ice water. Excuse me? Helena smiled thinly. Once the baby is born healthy, you'll have fulfilled your purpose, Amara. Finally, definitively. Don't you feel relieved? She left before Amara could respond. Amara sat on the edge of the bed, her hands shaking, and realized something terrible. The pregnancy hadn't saved her. It had doomed her. They didn't need her anymore. They just needed what was growing inside her. And once that was delivered, she would be disposable. Amara placed both hands on her stomach and whispered to the tiny life inside her. I'll protect you, I promise. No matter what happens, I'll protect you. She just didn't know yet how much that promise would cost, or how soon she'd have to pay it. The contractions started 3 weeks early. Amara woke at 2 a.m. with pain radiating through her lower back, her breath catching as the first wave crashed over her. She reached for Daniel, but his side of the bed was empty. Cold. He'd been sleeping in his study for the past month. Too much stress, he'd said. The baby needs you calm, as if his absence was somehow for her benefit. Another contraction hit, stronger this time, and Amara gasped, her hand moving to her swollen belly where the twins, because of course it was twins, one more complication had been kicking all evening. She managed to get to her phone and call Daniel. He answered on the 5th ring, his voice thick with sleep. What? The babies are coming, Amara said through gritted teeth. I need to go to the hospital. Silence. Then, I'll call my mother. Daniel, I need you. But he'd already hung up. 20 minutes later, Helena arrived with a driver and a glacial expression. Daniel appeared moments after, looking rumpled and distant. How far apart are the contractions? Helena asked, not looking at Amara. 5 minutes, Amara gasped. Then we have time. Let's not be dramatic. The labor lasted 19 hours. 19 hours of pain that rewrote Amara's understanding of suffering. 19 hours of nurses changing shifts while Daniel sat in the corner, scrolling through his phone. 19 hours of Helena making calls about securing the nursery and updating the paperwork. When complications arose, the first twin was breech. Amara's blood pressure spiked dangerously. The doctors recommended an emergency C-section. Helena signed the consent forms before Amara could even process what was happening. It's for the best, Helena said. We need those babies delivered safely. Not we need you safe. Not we need all 3 of you healthy. Just, we need those babies. Amara woke from surgery in a fog of pain and medication. Her abdomen felt like it had been split open, which, she realized dimly, it had been. The first thing she heard was crying. 2 different pitches. 2 tiny voices wailing in harmony. My babies, she whispered, trying to sit up. A nurse appeared beside her. Mrs. Whitmore, please don't move. You need to rest. I want to see them. Please. They're in the nursery. Your family is with them. Family. Not your husband. Family. Bring them to me, Amara said, her voice stronger despite the pain. Please. I need to hold them. The nurse looked uncomfortable. I'll check with. They're my children, Amara said, tears streaming down her face. Please. But before the nurse could respond, the door opened. Daniel walked in, his face carefully blank. Behind him, Helena and the family lawyer, Mr. Carson, the same man who'd witnessed her prenup, filed into the small recovery room. Something was wrong. Amara could feel it in the air, cold and final. You're awake, Daniel said. Good. We need to talk. I want to see the babies first, Amara said. Are they okay? Are they healthy? They're perfect, Helena said, and her smile was razor sharp. 2 healthy boys, 7 pounds each. The Whitmore line is secured. Secured. As if the babies were a business acquisition. I want to hold them, Amara said. In a moment, Daniel said, and his voice had that rehearsed quality she'd learned to fear. First, we need to discuss some changes. Mr. Carson stepped forward, opening his briefcase and pulling out papers. Thick papers. Legal papers. No. What is this? Amara whispered, though she already knew. Somehow, she already knew. Daniel couldn't meet her eyes. My family and I have decided this arrangement isn't working. The marriage it was a mistake. We think it's best if we end things cleanly. The room tilted. Amara's hands gripped the hospital bed rails, her stitches screaming in protest. You're divorcing me? Her voice was barely audible. Now? 3 hours after I gave birth to your sons? The timing is unfortunate, Helena said, not sounding sorry at all. But necessary. The boys need stability. They need to be raised properly. By people who understand their legacy. You've fulfilled your biological function, Amara. We're grateful for that. But your role ends here. My role? Amara's laugh was broken, hysterical. They're my children. They're Whitmore heirs, Helena corrected. And you signed a prenuptial agreement that was very clear about custody in the event of divorce. Given your instability, your lack of resources, your inability to provide the kind of life these boys deserve. I'm their mother, Amara screamed, and the pain in her abdomen exploded, but she didn't care. You can't take my babies. We're not taking them, Daniel said, his voice cold. We're keeping what's ours. You'll have visitation rights, supervised, of course. Supervised? Amara couldn't breathe. Daniel, please don't do this. We can work it out. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it. I love you. I love our babies, please. She was begging. She was broken. She was bleeding through her hospital gown, barely able to sit up, and she was begging. Daniel looked at her finally, and his eyes were empty. This doesn't mean I hate you, he said quietly. It means you chose them, Amara whispered. He didn't deny it. Mr. Carson placed the divorce papers on Amara's bedside table, right next to the water pitcher and the pain medication button she desperately needed to press. Sign here, here, and here, he said mechanically, pointing to highlighted lines with a pen. And if I don't? Amara asked, though she already knew the answer. Then we'll file anyway, Helena said. And we'll use your refusal as evidence of your instability, your inability to act in the children's best interests, your unsuitability as a mother. We have the resources to drag this through court for years, Amara. Do you? She didn't. She had nothing. No money beyond the pittance from the prenup. No family with resources. No way to fight a legal battle against the Whitmore empire. Down the hall, one of the babies started crying again. Oliver. Or maybe Ethan. She hadn't even held them long enough to tell them apart. Can I hold them? Amara asked, her voice breaking completely. Before I sign. Please, just once. Helena and Daniel exchanged a glance. 5 minutes, Helena said finally. But we'll be present. A nurse brought the twins, swaddled in blue blankets, their tiny faces red from crying. She placed them carefully in Amara's arms, one in each, and for a moment, one perfect, devastating moment, Amara felt complete. Oliver, she whispered to the baby on her left, somehow knowing. And Ethan. She'd chosen those names months ago. Strong names, good names, names that meant strength and endurance. They'd need both. I love you, she whispered, memorizing their faces. I love you so much. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. The babies stared up at her with unfocused eyes, their tiny hands grasping at air. "Time's up," Helena said. The nurse took the babies back despite Amara's broken sob, despite her arms reaching after them, despite everything. Mr. Carson placed the pen in her shaking hand. Amara looked at Daniel one last time. "This is who you are," she said. "This is who you'll always be. A coward who breaks vows and abandons his family because his mother told him to." Daniel's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Amara signed. Not because she was weak, not because she accepted this, but because refusing would only hurt her more, and she needed to survive. She needed to be strong enough to fight back. She just didn't know how yet. Helena took the papers, examining them with satisfaction. "The boys will be well cared for. You have my word." "Your word means nothing," Amara said. Helena smiled. "Perhaps, but it's all you're getting." They filed out Daniel, Helena, the lawyer taking her babies with them, leaving Amara alone in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and blood and the death of every dream she'd ever had. She lay back against the pillows, her hand on her empty, butchered stomach, and let the tears come. She cried until a different nurse came to check her vitals and gave her more pain medication. She cried until the medication pulled her under into dark, dreamless sleep. But before she went under, she thought, "This isn't over. They think they've won. They're wrong." 2 days after signing away her marriage, Amara was still in the hospital. The C-section had complications, an infection, elevated blood pressure, something about fluids, the doctors explained in medical terminology that sounded like a foreign language. Her mother had been sleeping in a chair beside her bed, holding her hand through every fever spike, every nightmare. "You're going to be okay, baby," her mother whispered. "You're stronger than all of them." Amara didn't feel strong. She felt hollowed out, excavated, a building after demolition, nothing but rubble and dust. The babies were gone. Daniel was gone. Her marriage was gone. She had nothing. That's what she believed until the lawyer arrived. His name was Marcus Chen, and he looked nothing like the Whitmore's lawyer. No expensive suit, no cold efficiency. He wore a simple gray jacket and carried a worn leather briefcase, and his eyes were kind when he knocked softly on her hospital room door. "Mrs. Collins?" he said, using her maiden name. Amara's mother looked up sharply. "Who are you?" "My name is Marcus Chen. I'm an attorney with Preston and Associates. I'm here about Amara's father." Amara's heart stuttered. "My father's been dead for 25 years. "I know," Marcus said gently. "That's why I'm here. May I come in?" Amara's mother looked at her daughter, then nodded reluctantly. Marcus pulled up a chair and opened his briefcase. "What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but I promise you, every word is true and legally verified." He pulled out a folder thick with documents. "Your father, Jonathan Collins, didn't die in a car accident as you were told. He died of a heart attack 3 years ago, in Singapore, where he'd been living and working since leaving the United States when you were 3 years old." Amara's world tilted again. "What? Your parents separated when you were very young. Your father had issues, gambling primarily. Your mother left him to protect you. But after she left, something changed in your father. He got clean, got help, and he built something extraordinary." Marcus spread documents across the hospital bed. Financial statements, trust documents, corporate registrations. He founded a financial consulting firm that grew into one of the most successful investment companies in Southeast Asia. He made a fortune, and every dollar of it, every single cent, he placed in trust for you. Amara stared at the numbers. They didn't make sense. Too many zeros, too many commas. "That's not possible," she whispered. $500 million, Marcus said clearly, plus controlling interest in Collins Global Holdings, which manages another $3 billion in assets. "It's all yours, Amara. It's been waiting for you since the day you turned 25. I've been trying to reach you for 3 years, but I got married," Amara said numbly. "I moved into the Whitmore mansion. I changed my contact information. She disappeared into Daniel's world so completely that her own past couldn't find her." "Why didn't he contact me himself?" Amara asked, tears streaming down her face. "Before he died? Why didn't he?" "He tried," Marcus said gently. "Multiple times. But your mother," he looked at Amara's mother apologetically. "She returned every letter. She believed he'd hurt you again if given the chance." Amara's mother was crying too, her hand over her mouth. I thought I was protecting you. I thought he was still the man who left us with nothing. I didn't know. He left a letter, Marcus said, pulling an envelope from the briefcase. For you to read when you were ready. Amara took the letter with shaking hands. The envelope was yellowed, aged, marked with her name, in handwriting she didn't recognize but somehow knew. She opened it. My dearest Amara, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and you're probably angry. You have every right to be. I was a terrible father, a terrible husband. I chose addiction over my family, and I lost everything that mattered. When your mother left with you, it was the wake-up call I needed, but by then, it was too late to earn back your trust. So I did the only thing I could do. I got sober. I built a life I could be proud of, and I built you a future that would give you choices I never had. This money isn't meant to replace the father you deserved. Nothing can do that, but it can give you freedom, independence, the ability to walk away from anything or anyone that doesn't serve you. Use it wisely, use it powerfully, and know that even though I wasn't there, I thought about you every single day. Every business decision I made thinking, will this help Amara? Will this give her a better life? I hope it does. I hope you find happiness. I hope you find love, real love, the kind that protects rather than controls. And I hope you forgive me, even though I don't deserve it. All my love, your father. Amara read the letter 3 times before she could speak. $500 million, she finally whispered. Plus the controlling shares. Marcus confirmed. You're not just wealthy, Amara. You're powerful. Collins Global Holdings has investments in technology, real estate, pharmaceutical companies. You have leverage, influence, options. Options. The word echoed in Amara's mind. For 3 years, she'd had no options, no power, no voice. She'd been controlled, manipulated, discarded. But now, the Whitmores don't know about this, she said slowly. Marcus shook his head. I filed the paperwork yesterday. As of this morning, the trust is activated and the assets are legally yours. But the information is private until you choose to make it public. Which means, Marcus said with a slight smile, they think you're powerless, broke, desperate. Amara looked at her mother, who was staring at the documents in shock. Mama, Amara whispered, I'm not helpless. No, baby, her mother said, squeezing her hand. You're not. Amara looked back at Marcus. I need your help. I need the best legal team money can buy. I need investigators. I have a team on standby, Marcus said, waiting for your authorization. What can they do? Marcus leaned forward. Whatever you need. Custody battles, financial investigations, corporate audits. We can dig into the Whitmore empire and find every crack, every violation, every secret they're hiding. Amara felt something shift inside her. Not hope. Hope was too fragile. This was something harder, colder, more dangerous. This was clarity. The prenup, she said. They used it against me. They said I'd get almost nothing in the divorce. The prenup was predicated on you having no independent wealth, Marcus said. Now you have $500 million. The entire agreement is potentially voidable. At minimum, we can renegotiate custody terms. Custody. Her babies. Oliver and Ethan, who she'd held for 5 minutes total before they were taken from her. I want my sons back, Amara said, her voice steady for the first time in days. Can you get them back? I can try, Marcus said. It won't be easy. The Whitmores have resources and connections, but so do you now. And you have something they don't. What's that? Marcus smiled. The element of surprise. Right now they think you're defeated. Let them keep thinking that. Let them believe they've won. And while they're celebrating, we'll build a case so airtight they won't know what hit them. Amara looked down at the documents spread across her hospital bed, at the numbers that represented a father's redemption and a daughter's liberation. How long do I have to wait? She asked. Physically? You need to heal from surgery, at least a month before you're strong enough for court battles. Strategically? The longer you wait, the stronger our case becomes. 3 months, 6 months, long enough to document everything, build an unassailable position. 6 months without my babies, Amara whispered. Her mother squeezed her hand. 6 months to make sure you never lose them again. Amara closed her eyes and made a decision. She would wait, She would heal. She would prepare. And when she was ready, when she was strong enough, armed enough, dangerous enough, she would show the Whitmores exactly what happened when they underestimated her. Do it, she told Marcus. Start building the case. Quietly. I don't want them to know anything until I'm ready. Marcus nodded, gathering his documents. They won't know a thing. Welcome to your new life, Miss Collins. After he left, Amara lay back against the pillows, her hand on her healing abdomen, her mind racing. Daniel thought he'd won. Helena thought she'd eliminated a problem. They had no idea that Amara Collins had just become the most dangerous woman they'd ever underestimated, and their fall when it came would be absolute. 6 months later, Amara stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of her new penthouse apartment, watching the city lights flicker below. She barely recognized herself anymore. The woman in the reflection was stronger, sharper, harder. Her hair was professionally styled. Her clothes were designer not because Helena picked them, but because Amara chose them. Her posture was confident, no longer hunched and apologetic. She'd spent 6 months healing, 6 months preparing, 6 months building a case that would destroy the Whitmore family completely. Behind her, Marcus Chen sat at her dining table, surrounded by documents. Everything's ready, he said. Custody petition filed. Financial investigation complete. Federal audit triggered. The moment you give the word, it all goes into motion. Amara turned from the window. What did you find? Marcus smiled grimly. Everything. Tax evasion going back 15 years, money laundering through offshore accounts, fraudulent charitable deductions. The Whitmore Foundation, that pillar of their public image, is essentially a tax shelter with questionable accounting practices. Illegal? Borderline. Enough to trigger investigations that will tear their reputation apart. And that's before we get to the custody issues. Amara's chest tightened. My babies! How are they? Marcus's expression softened. According to our surveillance, which is completely legal, I assure you they're healthy. Helena hired a full staff to care for them. Nannies, nurses, the works. Daniel's barely involved in their daily care. Of course he wasn't. Daniel had wanted heirs, not children. And the custody case? Strong. Very strong. We have documentation of the Whitmore's coercion, hospital staff willing to testify about the divorce papers being served 3 hours post-surgery. Evidence that you were not mentally capable of consenting to those terms given your medical state and medication. Your father's inheritance invalidates the prenup's financial assumptions. And, Marcus paused, we have something else. He slid a folder across the table. Amara opened it and felt her blood go cold. Photographs. Daniel with a woman. Not just any woman, Celeste Ashford, his ex-girlfriend. The timestamps showed the dates. 3 months before the twins were born. 2 months, 1 month. Daniel had been seeing Celeste throughout Amara's entire pregnancy. He was cheating, Amara whispered. Extensively, Marcus confirmed, which gives us grounds to challenge the divorce settlement. He filed citing irreconcilable differences, but adultery is relevant in custody determinations, especially combined with the coercion and your changed financial circumstances. Amara stared at the photos. She should feel something: rage, betrayal, hurt. But she felt nothing except cold calculation. Good. Emotion was liability. Clarity was power. What happens when we file? She asked. Chaos, Marcus said simply. The custody petition will blindside them. They think you're living with your mother, broke and broken. When they discover you're worth $500 million and have controlling interest in a global investment firm, the entire dynamic shifts. They'll fight back. They'll try. But we've built this case to anticipate every move. Richard Whitmore's financial crimes will occupy the family's legal resources. Helena's foundation will face IRS scrutiny. And Daniel's adultery, combined with a coercive divorce, paints him as an unfit parent. Will I get full custody? Marcus hesitated. At minimum, you'll get shared custody with significant visitation rights. Best case? Full custody with the Whitmores getting supervised visitation. The key is that you're no longer powerless. You're not negotiating from weakness anymore. You're dictating terms. Amara walked to the window again, looking out at the city that used to intimidate her. She'd spent 6 months not just healing physically, but transforming completely. She'd met with therapists who helped her understand the psychological abuse she'd endured. She'd trained with Marcus's team to present herself in court. She'd learned corporate governance, investment strategy, leadership. She'd become Collins Global Holdings managing partner, not just in name but in practice. And she'd prepared for this moment. The moment she stopped being a victim and became a force. There's one more thing, Marcus said. The Whitmore Foundation is hosting their annual gala next week. It's their biggest event. Politicians, investors, media, society columnists, everyone who matters will be there. And? And you received an invitation, not as Daniel's ex-wife, as the managing partner of Collins Global Holdings. The foundation's committee doesn't know the connection. They just know you represent a major potential donor. Amara turned slowly. They invited me to their gala? Marcus smiled. They have no idea who you are. You've kept such a low profile that your name doesn't trigger recognition. To them, you're just another wealthy executive they're courting for donations. The irony was almost beautiful. What do you recommend? Amara asked. Attend, Marcus said immediately. File the custody petition the morning of the gala. By evening, they'll have been served, but they'll still have to attend their own event. They'll be forced to maintain appearances while their world crumbles. And you'll walk in as exactly what you are, powerful, untouchable, victorious. Amara felt something dangerous rise in her chest. Not revenge. Revenge was messy, emotional. This was justice, precise and devastating. I'll need a dress, she said. Marcus laughed. I took the liberty of consulting with a stylist. She has options waiting. The next week moved like a dream. Amara spent hours with the legal team, reviewing every document, preparing for every contingency. She practiced her introduction. Amara Collins, managing partner, Collins Global Holdings. Simple, professional, powerful. She met with the stylist, who brought dresses that made her look like exactly what she'd become, a woman who commanded rooms and controlled empires. She visited the penthouse nursery she'd prepared 2 cribs, soft lighting, everything her babies would need when she brought them home. She was ready. The morning of the gala, Marcus filed the custody petition. By noon, the Whitmores had been served. By 2 p.m., Marcus reported back. Helena is making calls. Daniel is in emergency meetings with his lawyers. Richard is scrambling to address the IRS inquiry. They're panicking. And tonight? Amara asked. Tonight, they have to smile for cameras and pretend everything's fine while their empire burns. Amara looked at herself in the mirror. The dress was midnight blue, elegant and severe. Her hair was swept back. Her makeup was flawless. She looked like power personified. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. How dare you? You'll pay for this. Helena. Threatening her even now. Amara deleted the message without responding. Threats only worked on people who had something to lose. Amara had already lost everything. She'd been broken down, discarded, left for dead. But she'd rebuilt herself into something the Whitmores couldn't comprehend. She wasn't the weak woman who begged in a hospital room anymore. She was a queen they never saw coming. And tonight, she would take back her crown. The car arrived at 7 p.m. Marcus accompanied her, looking sharp in his tuxedo. Ready? He asked. Amara looked at the folder in her lap, copies of all the evidence, all the documentation, everything they'd built over 6 months. I'm ready, she said. The car pulled away from the curb, heading toward the Whitmore Foundation gala. Heading toward the end of the Whitmore empire. Heading toward justice. Amara placed one hand on her stomach, flat now, healed, but still marked by the scars of what they'd done to her. For Oliver and Ethan, she whispered. For every woman who's been told she's powerless. The city lights blurred past the window as they drove toward destiny, and Amara Collins smiled. Not with cruelty, not with malice, but with the quiet certainty of someone who'd survived hell and come back stronger. They thought they'd destroyed her. They'd only forged her into steel. And steel doesn't break. It cuts. The Whitmore Foundation Gala was exactly what Amara remembered, excessive, ostentatious, designed to project power and old money prestige. Crystal chandeliers, ice sculptures, a string quartet playing in the corner, 500 of the city's most influential people, dressed in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, drinking champagne that cost more per bottle than most people earned in a week. Amara stepped out of the car and paused at the entrance, letting the moment settle over her. 6 months ago, she would have been terrified. She would have hunched her shoulders, checked her dress obsessively, worried about using the wrong fork. Tonight, she walked up the steps like she owned them. Because in a very real sense, she did. Collins Global Holdings had investments in 3 of the companies sponsoring this event. Her wealth dwarfed most of the people in that ballroom. And her power, her real power, came from something money couldn't buy. She came from surviving what should have destroyed her. "Miss Collins," the doorman said, checking her invitation. "Welcome to the Whitmore Foundation Gala." Inside, the ballroom was a sea of influential faces. Amara recognized politicians, tech CEOs, old money families, whose names appeared on hospital wings and university buildings. And there, across the room, stood the Whitmores. Helena in a silver gown, holding court near the stage, her smile practiced and perfect. Richard beside her, checking his phone despite the formal setting. Victoria laughing with a group of young socialites. And Daniel. Daniel standing with Celeste Ashford, his hand on her lower back in a gesture of casual intimacy that told Amara everything she needed to know about how quickly he'd moved on. For a moment, just a moment, Amara felt the ghost of the woman she used to be. The woman who would have seen that and broken down crying. The woman who would have believed she deserved the pain. But that woman was dead. Amara had buried her in a hospital room 6 months ago. "Amara Collins, managing partner of Collins Global Holdings," she said to the foundation coordinator, a nervous woman with a clipboard who'd been assigned to greet major donors. The woman's eyes widened. "Oh, Miss Collins, we're so honored to have you. Helena Whitmore has been hoping to meet you personally." "That won't be necessary," Amara said smoothly. "I'll find her myself." She walked through the crowd, and something remarkable happened. People noticed her. Not as Daniel's embarrassing ex-wife, not as the woman who didn't belong, but as someone who commanded attention simply by existing in space. "Miss Collins?" A tech billionaire she'd met at an investors' conference approached. "I didn't realize you'd be here." Collins Global's Q3 performance was extraordinary. They talked business for a few minutes. Then a senator joined them, interested in discussing Collins Global's infrastructure investments. Then a pharmaceutical CEO who wanted to schedule a meeting. Amara was holding court in the middle of the Whitmore Foundation Gala, and she hadn't even acknowledged the Whitmores yet. She could see Helena watching from across the room, her expression shifting from curiosity to confusion to something that might have been recognition. Finally, Amara excused herself from the conversation and walked directly toward Helena. The crowd seemed to part around her. Helena's smile was fixed in place, but her eyes were sharp and assessing. "Good evening. I don't believe we've—" "Helena," Amara said, her voice clear and steady. "It's been 6 months." The color drained from Helena's face. Recognition hit like a physical blow. "Amara?" Helena whispered, her perfect composure cracking. How did you—" "I was invited," Amara said. "Collins Global Holdings, managing partner. Surely you remember me? I used to live in your house. I gave birth to your grandchildren. You served me divorce papers in a hospital bed." People nearby had gone quiet, sensing drama. Richard appeared at Helena's elbow. "What is she doing here?" he hissed. "Making an appearance," Amara said calmly. "Also, I wanted to tell you in person you've been served custody papers this morning. I'm suing for full custody of Oliver and Ethan." Helena's champagne glass trembled in her hand. "You can't. The prenup is void," Amara said. "Turns out my father left me $500 million and a controlling stake in a global investment firm. The prenup was predicated on me having no independent wealth. That assumption was incorrect." She could see the calculations running behind Helena's eyes. The panic, the desperate scrambling for control. "You're bluffing," Helena said, but her voice was weak. "Am I?" Amara smiled. "Ask your lawyers. I'm sure they've called by now. You might also want to ask them about the IRS inquiry into your foundation's accounting practices, and the SEC investigation into Richard's offshore accounts, and the documentation we have of Daniel's affair with Celeste Ashford throughout my entire pregnancy." Richard's face went gray. "You bitch." "Careful," Amara said, her voice dropping to something dangerous. "We're at your event, surrounded by press, surrounded by donors. Do you really want to cause a scene?" Daniel appeared then, Celeste still on his arm, and froze when he saw Amara. "Amara?" he said, and he looked genuinely shocked. "What are you doing here?" "Taking back what's mine," Amara said simply. She looked at Celeste. "Congratulations on your relationship. I hope you've seen the prenup he'll make you sign. Very thorough. Learn from his mistakes with me." Celeste looked confused. Daniel looked sick. "You can't do this," Helena said, her voice rising slightly. "We gave you everything. A home, a family, a life. You gave me nothing." Amara said, her voice cutting through Helena's delusions like a blade. "You took everything. My dignity, my husband, my children, my identity. You broke me down because you could, because I was powerless and you were strong." She stepped closer, her voice dropping so only the Whitmores could hear. "But I rebuilt myself. And the woman standing in front of you now? She's stronger than you'll ever be. Because I know what it's like to have nothing, and I survived it. Can you?" Helena's hand shook so badly she had to set down her champagne glass. "The custody hearing is scheduled for next month," Amara continued. "My lawyers will be in touch. Until then, I'd like to see my sons. Supervised visitation, as outlined in the emergency petition. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. "Absolutely not," Helena started. "It's not a request," Amara said. "It's a court order. Violate it and you'll be in contempt. Add that to your growing legal problems." She turned to Daniel, who looked like he might be sick. "You told me I was incapable," she said quietly. "You told me I wasn't strong enough. You chose your family over me because you thought I was weak." "Amara, I don't need your apology," she said. "I don't need your regret. I don't need anything from you anymore. I just need you to know that every cruel word, every humiliation, every moment, you let them destroy me. I remember all of it." She smiled, and it wasn't kind. "And I'm going to use it in court." She turned to walk away, then paused. "Oh, and Helena, about that donation you were hoping for from Collins Global Holdings? Consider this my official decline. We only invest in ethical organizations." Then she walked away, leaving the Whitmores standing frozen in the middle of their own gala, surrounded by guests who were definitely close enough to have heard everything. Marcus was waiting by the exit, trying not to smile. "How'd it go?" he asked. "Perfectly," Amara said. As they walked toward the car, Amara heard her name being whispered, heard the gossip already starting to spread through the ballroom like wildfire. The Whitmores would have to stay for the rest of the gala, would have to smile and pretend everything was fine while their world collapsed around them, would have to give speeches and thank donors, while knowing that everyone now knew their darkest secrets. It was poetic, really. Amara settled into the car and checked her phone. A message from her mother. "Proud of you, baby. Come home when you're ready." Home. She had one now. A real one. Not a mansion full of cold marble and colder people, but a space that was hers, where her sons would grow up loved and protected. "To the courthouse tomorrow?" Marcus asked. "To the courthouse," Amara confirmed. "And then to get my children." As the car pulled away from the gala, Amara looked back at the grand building one last time. She'd walked into that family 3 years ago believing love could conquer anything. She'd learned the hard way that love without respect, without protection, without partnership, was just pretty packaging around poison. But she'd also learned something else. She'd learned that being underestimated was the greatest weapon she'd ever been given. The Whitmores thought they'd destroyed her by taking her children, her marriage, her identity. Instead, they'd freed her to become something far more dangerous. A mother who would burn down empires to protect her children. A woman who knew exactly how much power lived in patience. A queen who'd reclaimed her crown. And tomorrow morning, when she walked into that visitation room and held Oliver and Ethan for the first time in 6 months, she would whisper to them the same promise she'd made in the hospital. "I'll protect you, always, no matter what." This time, she had the power to keep that promise. And the Whitmores would learn what every empire eventually learns, that foundations built on cruelty don't stand forever. They crumble. And when they fall hard. Amara smiled out at the city lights, her hand resting on the court documents that would change everything, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. The war was over, and she had won.
Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Subscribe, like, and click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.